The UFC is killing boxing, but why? Over the past decade, we've seen the meteoric rise in popularity of the UFC and the arguable decline of boxing. For so long, boxing was the main combat sport. Everybody would tune in weekly to watch massive fights. You look at Ali versus Foreman, Tyson versus Lewis. Boxing never used to have a key problem that it has now. The best do not fight the best. Those two fights that I just mentioned are two out of a massive number of massive fights that happened between the 60s and the 90s that pioneered the sport of boxing, that made boxing fans fall in love with the sport and tell their kids about the sport and got them to be fans of the sport. Fans are so important for the sport. If fans are enjoying the sport, they're buying the pay-per-views, they're going to the fights, they're watching media, they're building the popularity and building the brand of the sport and making more money and making the bigger fights possible and making boxing even better. But boxing does not have the connection with the fans anymore. You feel in the last couple of years, and maybe even further than that, boxing is losing its connection with the fans, and this is because the big fights are not happening. Now look at the UFC. The UFC has a structure in place, meaning the best fight the best. You look at recently, for example, the number 1 and the number 2 in the middleweight division, Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira, have just had 2 fights. But whilst those two are fighting, the number 3 and number 4 in the division don't just sit back and wait for their title shot, they fight each other. And that's what we saw with Vettori and Whittaker. And this happens in every division of the UFC, and it means the level of competitions is always at a high level throughout the UFC roster. So the fans know, even if it's not a massive UFC fight night, there's still going to be a UFC card that's stacked with close to call fights. Now you look at boxing. Take a look at the top 15 of the heavyweight division. How many have fought each other? Excluding Anthony Joshua, most of the top 10 have not faced any other top 10 fighters, and if they have, it's either 1 or 2. So many big fights that fans have been wanting for so long have just not happened in boxing. Joshua Fury, Joshua Wilder, you look at Spence versus Crawford, the fans are dying for these fights, but due to boxing politics and other reasons, the fights don't happen, and this leaves the fans frustrated with boxing and looking for something else to watch. Another reason why the UFC is defeating boxing is because in boxing, you never really know who the best is. This is because there's so many belts in boxing. Every single division has 4 major governing bodies, meaning it's possible to have 4 different world champions. And this is a stat whilst I was researching for this video that even shocked me. Since 2007, there's only ever been 13 undisputed champions. When you look at the UFC, every single division has an undisputed champion, and that's because there's only 1 belt. So the fans know who the best is, the fighters know who the best is, and this keeps them hungry because they want to go for that UFC gold that actually means something, as opposed to boxing where the belts have become saturated and don't really mean anything now because there's so many different champions. The issue with the belts plays into the issue of the big fights not happening. Fighters having belts gives them leverage and excuses not to fight each other. Fighters can claim that they're the best because they hold a belt and demand unrealistic expectations in fight negotiations and leading to the fight not happening. So whilst boxing slowly dies and intrigue vastly decreases, the UFC is growing at an almighty pace, and the most important thing is that the UFC is attracting fans of boxing by giving them exactly what boxing isn't. Thank you very much for watching this video essay. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like and subscribe. It does help out the channel, and let me know what you'd like to see me make video essays about. And finally, I'd like to give a shout out to TJ Does Fights, because I got this idea video style from him and he makes awesome videos as well, so check him out as well. But thank you guys.